Morning, everyone. It's Tuesday morning, and we're here at Wisdom's Chats. Cecile, I'm very grateful that you're here so that we can represent a greater portion of the population. Otherwise, we're all men. But good to have you all together. So we are following the topic of decision making. And we had Trevor's description yesterday of making a decision, Cecile making a decision. So Trevor's making a decision. Okay, we're going to the river. We're going to go down the river. Cecile's decision is we after 22 years of living in Gauteng, we are going to Jeffreys Bay. And then Trevor described once you've made that decision, then you're in the river. And the river takes you, and it's got these channels, and you've got to make these instant decisions here, there, and sometimes you hit the right one, and sometimes you hit a rock. And Cecile describes, okay, I've made this decision to go to Jeffreys Bay. Now it's a case of doing. I've got to get on. I've got to pack. I've got to sort out. I've got to, all the there's now ramifications to that decision. And so that's what led to, so what does it take to make not just any decision, but good decisions that seem as if, or are in retrospect, because very often we don't know in the moment, but we look back and we say, well, that was a right decision. Or even if things didn't work out, you know that you made the right decision given the information you had at hand. And that's what I would like to just talk about in terms of decision making. If I think about it from my perspective, I make a decision on, I think it depends on what you want. What do you want? And that what do you want is determined by your own sense of identity, purpose, passion, desires, and it means that you've done some thinking, you've done some processing, you've got some understanding of who you are, that is no longer something that you have to keep mulling over. You have a good sense of what do you want. And then the next question is, what do I need? What is actually essential and important for me now? And then the last thing that I want to say is it's also dependent on, well, sorry, the second last thing, it's also dependent on the context. Is what's happening now? What am I seeing in front of me? What's relevant? What's applicable that I need to pay attention to in my environment? What are my resources that I have available to me? So context is really important. And then it's this mix and balance between data. So what is the information that I'm getting? How is that giving me the insights that I don't have in my own capacity? I don't, if I only rely on my experience or assumptions without getting any external data, I can make unwise decisions. So I need information externally that informs my decision. But I also need experience to be able to interpret that data, to be able to understand it, and to be able to apply it appropriately in my context and in my situation. I think about it like a GPS that will take you on a route. It'll take you the shortest route, but it could take you through a drug-infested criminal, area that is highly dangerous, but it doesn't know that. So you have to use your judgment as well. So those are the things that came to mind when I was thinking about decision making. And so you pick up what is important to you about decision making. And Trevor, I'm going to come to you because, this was a an important topic for you. You really highlighted it as this is what's key today. So let us know what you're thinking.
Okay, so I was looking back on much of my old writings that started in the late 80s, early 90s, and I've just developed and developed, and it's been absolutely consistent for me. The big difference between successful leaders and absolutely useless leadership is in their ability to take decisions. And most decisions are taken looking to just affect future happenings, and you're basing it on past information. So really at the best is exactly as you said, you can only take decisions based on the information that you have at hand, and you can't second guess yourself. And once you've got that, then you have to start thinking about taking decisions as you go down the road. So let's take that river analogy or metaphor, and so you take a decision to take the left channel instead of the right channel, and you come up against, you start hearing that there's a massive waterfall ahead. You can't turn that canoe and go back in a flood. So you've got to then take another instant decision. What do? Do I go and shoot this thing, or do I get out and portage around it? So at all times, you're taking decisions, and you've got to be ready. And you can't turn around and say, oh, you know what, that decision I took 15 minutes ago was a bum decision. Let me start again, go all the way back there, because you're out of that race. And so you also brought up the concept of context. Some people will turn around and say, of course I can go back and start that race because I've got all the time in the world. Well, it just depends on the context that you're making the decision in. But myself, that's why I put this here. Be a decision maker. The ability to positively say yes or no and then get on with it is what allows you to move forward. And most people that I meet prefer not to take a decision. So they'll sit back and wait and say, okay, well, let me see what happens. That is a decision.
Thanks, Joe. That is exact. It's interesting. My youngest sister, who lived in Zimbabwe, well, we grew up in Zimbabwe, and when Zimbabwe, I mean, I know it's in a terrible state now, but it's been sort of on a rocky road, and my youngest sister was debating whether they should leave or not, immigrate to Australia, and it was backwards and forwards, and it was a year of this indecision and not knowing, and she was asking my advice, and I said, well, if you choose not to go to Australia, you are choosing to stay in Zimbabwe. And that's so that, and somehow just saying that galvanized her, because she didn't want to stay in Zimbabwe. So within 2 months, they were gone. So Donovan, and your daughter's there. I don't know if you've disappeared now. We'd love to see you and your daughter. And what do you think?
Morning, Lee. Morning, everyone. Yeah, decision making is not so easy because it has consequences. So I think someone once says, whether you make a decision or not, you still suffer the consequences. So it actually puts you in a very difficult position. So it takes a lot of thinking, and sometimes one can end up overthinking or over analyzing, and then you end up with a decision that maybe wasn't the best, and then you just have to write it out and reach the destination wherever it leads you to. But sometimes if there's an opportunity when you realize maybe it wasn't the best decision, you can consider going back or changing course, but obviously it will impact on your time, time wasted that you can't get back anymore. So it's quite daunting. It's for me, it's not easy to make decisions, but often I'm placed in a position where I have to make decisions. And someone also once said, a good leader is one who decides whether it's the right or the wrong decision, but you have to make a decision at the end of the day. Thank you.
Thanks, Donovan. Great input as always, sort of clear and to the point, and it's not, as you say, not easy. Herman, welcome. Great to have you here. What are your thoughts about decision making?
I think, good morning, everyone. Context is important. Sometimes decisions, there's a gut feel, and you go according to that, and it turns out to be absolutely the right decision. But if it's a complex challenge I have, I really need to look at taking Trevor's example, where he all of a sudden had to make a decision whether he shoots a rabbit or walks around it. If he would have done his research before and really evaluated what the river looked like and what the conditions of the river were, he may have been able to, he may have not taken the left turn or the right turn, whichever he chose. He may have taken a different one because of better information. I think decision-making is very much a question of going out there. If others are involved, interview your stakeholders, be willing to change perspectives, and be extremely flexible. And also be aware that past experience is not always an asset in decision-making. It can be a big obstacle too, particularly if I'm challenged by something which is completely new and out of the ordinary. So I think the collection of information and listening to circumstances, to other people, I think is critical. Yet at the same time, we need to avoid a process that takes that long and avoids me to take the decision because things have happened. You know what I'm trying to say. In other words, you have been dithering too long and you have no choice to make a decision anymore because things have happened already. Thank you.
Thanks, Herman. I think that really is important to this idea that you have to plan, you have to do the research, but timing is also of the essence. And sometimes you get forced to making the wrong decision because you've waited too long. So that's interesting. And Cecile, the decision maker and getting ready to head off to the white yonder. Tell us about decision making.
Yeah, I agree a lot with what Trevor has said. And that just reminded me of when we used to cycle a lot. I'm talking about mountain bike cycling. In the beginning, because I'm actually a good decision maker, I will make snap decisions immediately. My dad always used to say, fools rush in where angels fear to tread. Well, that's me. So in the beginning, when I started cycling, when you get to a difficult track in the on the course, you tend to do because you think your life is at stake, you tend to do the cautious thing and braking. And my husband always used to cycle here behind me and say, go, momentum is your friend. Don't stop. When you stop, then you are going to actually hurt yourself. And it is just getting your mind over that, okay, this is a difficult thing, but I just got to get through it. So I learned that in mountain bike cycling. Yeah, so that's one thing. And interestingly enough, on Saturday, we were at my grandchild's 9th birthday party at the big red barn, and 20 of his friends and family members were doing that acro branch thing. Now, all of us on this call have done enough climbing and those kind of stuff, swinging, climbing, whatever, in our lives without harnesses. So we don't need acro branch to pay whatever to go and climb over obstacles and hang in trees and whatever. But today's children don't. So I saw all these children, they are on obstacles, and some of them not difficult, but it's because they're not flat on the ground. And yes, some of them have fear of heights, but they almost freeze. They cry and cry while they're doing this. And I was like a wild woman of Borneo, trying to encourage them every little step of the way through the decision, because it's every one of these obstacles is a decision, and once you're in the decision, you can't stop. You just got to carry on. And interestingly enough, my son-in-law at one stage, when it was his son that was scared of a set of obstacles, where you have little upright poles on ropes and you have to step on them. And what Bastian kept on doing was hanging back. So your momentum is back. So I kept on shouting, it's high up in the air. I keep on shouting at him, forward, forward, move your hands forward. And it's the same as with cycling. You've got to keep your momentum forward. So when it comes, so yeah, I was shouting and Ines was saying, stop shouting all the time, Mook. But I said, but he's not doing what I'm saying. So the more you repeat it, the more he's going to actually do it, until he actually started doing it. And then when it comes to this moving, yeah, I've been doing, just one thing. Herman, what you say, often one can't actually do any research on where you're going, because in the river, today the river may be low. 2 days later, when you've researched it, the river is high, and then you've got to make the decision on the spot, on that very second. So that's often in life. There's no time to dither, to make even to have done your research. Yes, a lot of times you can do research, but sometimes you can't do research. Even with this moving to the coast now, I'm sitting meticulously looking at my business, looking at the income, the expenses, and I can only do it from where I am right now. But things change when you get to the other side. Things are cheaper. There are extra expenses or not, or whatever the story is. So I am trying to do meticulous, let's say, accounting. Where's Ed now? So that the decision making is easier. But I am known to be someone that can make decisions easier. And my policy is, if there are a lot of people involved, and with someone now that says you shouldn't tell other people what to do, that I will make a decision. And if there are other people involved, if they haven't made the decision, then I will try and convince them to follow my decision. So that's my forceful take on this.
It's interesting you say that, Cecile. I'm working with a new group at the moment, and there is a tension between this collaboration and listening to everybody and trying to come to a joint decision. And we've maybe spoken about this before, but at the end of the day, somebody wants somebody to make a decision. They're waiting. They actually, you think you are involving everybody, and you see that everybody has a role to play and a contribution to make, and that we make a joint decision. But in reality, there's a certain amount of frustration that's building up because somebody's not making the decision. And of course, you remember my name, right? I'm somebody. So Edward, tell us what you think about decision making.
Yeah, I sort of agree with all that's been said, but I think, there's a whole spectrum of decisions. There's those where you've got the time to do the research, gather the data, analyze the data, select some options, maybe do a few trial runs, a few pilots, and then launch the real thing. And there's those when you've got to make a really quick instant decision. And I think it's interesting. I was thinking about decision making, and a lot of people, when they talk about having a shock or a stress, they talk about flight or fight, but they forget about the third one, which is freeze. And if you look at animals, freeze is the impulse of the young, and the older ones will then go off and distract the tiger or whatever it is. And I think a lot of younger people tend to freeze because they don't have the experience, they don't have the knowledge, they don't have the whatever. So I think, it depends on what decision you're making. It was interesting. I heard a fighter pilot talk about a mission they flew over Sierra Leone, and they were flying over enemy territory, and there was a chance they would get shot down by the rebels and stuff. Not very much, because the rebels didn't have big guns, but they wanted to go flying low to show the locals they were there. But beforehand, they discussed every single thing that might happen. So when they had to make a decision, almost all choice was taken away from them. So they made the right decision. So, if we see enemy fire, I'll go left, you go right. But they still needed to make decisions, but by having all the work through beforehand, researched it all beforehand, thought it all through beforehand, they could cope with a situation where they didn't know what was going to happen, which I found really interesting. And I think also, as an accountant, I've come across loads and loads and loads and loads of people who use the irrelevant information. A lot of people will be on a project and they'll say, we've spent too much to scrap the project. We've invested too much in this, we can't stop it. And that's what's happened in the past is totally irrelevant in that situation. It's what we call sunk costs. You should be looking at what's the future revenue streams, what's the future expense streams. A lot of people work on data that's not relevant. And I had a really practical, I suppose, example of that. When I was hiking in the wilds of Scotland, I came across a river. I was going along the side of a loch, which is their name for a lake. And I came across a river that was in flood. And I looked at it and thought, no, it's too difficult, too dangerous to wade across. I think two things were going to happen. If I lost my footing, I'd either not get my rucksack off and drown, or I'd get my rucksack off, get to the bank, have no dry clothes, have no shelter, and die of hypothermia. So I decided not to cross the river. I went upstream thinking that, well, further upstream, if I can cross the smaller streams, I can get across the river. Unfortunately, it was fed by another loch. So I went round that loch, and eventually it came to sort of too steep sides and I couldn't get through. So I went all the way back. So 5 hours later, I'm back in exactly the same position I started at. And I looked at the river once more and thought, shall I cross it? And there was a huge temptation to cross it. But I said to myself, nothing's changed. Absolutely nothing's changed except my desire to cross it, which is totally irrelevant to this decision-making process. So I said, no, the first decision was right because nothing's changed. The only thing is I want to get across more. And I think a lot of time we allow that sort of stuff to influence a decision, and that's when things go wrong. That's when you have disasters. That's when people fall off mountains. And going back to Cecile's bit about momentum and stuff and gut feel, one time I went running, there's this cliff you can climb down in Cornwall, and you get to the bottom, and at very low tide, there are these massive rocks, which at very low tide are dry, and you can run across them for about 3 miles, leaping from rock to rock. If you think about it, you trip and fall. If you totally turn your brain off and just go with the flow, you just, it's a wonderful experience. And I think sometimes subconsciously we know the right thing to do, and we let our brain get in the way of making the right decision. So yeah, that's my thoughts on decision making. Very difficult, but I think the best decisions are made if you have the time to do the research, if you have the time to filter out all the irrelevant stuff and just concentrate on the really important things to decision making. And the other thing I've noticed is I've read a lot of books about, well, one of the books I read was called Extreme Survival. Actually, it wasn't, it was about extreme non-survival. And most of the disasters in there came about from a very, very small bad decision very early on in the process. And then a chain reaction followed. So I think, it's identifying what is the critical decision to make. And very often it's a lot earlier in the process than you think. So those are my thoughts.
You've got to love wisdoms when you hear these kinds of stories. So thank you, Edward. I'm very, the fact that you've lived this life, that you can tell those kinds of stories is amazing. And then on top of it, we've got doozy paddlers and mountain bike riders. And Jesper, I'm hoping you're going to give me hope, because I don't have any stories like that. So, but help us know from your perspective, what does it take to make decisions?
Thanks, Lee. No, I was also fascinated there by Aid's story, and I'm still waiting now to say, what did you eventually do to cross that river? So that you had to go back?
Very quickly, it took me a day detour to go a different way, a whole day.
But having said that, it cost you time, but it didn't cost you your life. And I think it comes back to almost the thread through all our stories is you cannot avoid making decisions. I mean, Lee, you started off with that story of your sister and that fear of the unknown versus the unpleasantness of the present. And you basically just had to ask a question and put it in context. And then the fear of the unknown became a lesser threat than the immediate present discomfort. And I think, I think when we grow up, we make decisions. A child make a decision on a daily basis. Or I want to climb the tree, or I want to do this or that, and then the peers put pressure on him to say, no, you can't do this, and yes, you can do that. I was actually trying to think, how do we actually develop a gut feel? So I think a child quickly pick up, hey, this is probably dangerous territory. I will get a hiding here. And that's where he starts getting his gut feel. But then when you get into business, it's an unknown world out there. And it's complex. And so how do you make decisions? And John Maxwell has got a saying, fail forward fast. And I think, Trevor, is also one of your favorite sayings. So you develop a gut feel by making decisions, some wrong and some right. And someone once said, you don't make the right decisions, you make a decision and then you work it right. And I think by making decisions and then working it right is where a lot of people then develop their gut feel to say, all right, it was a wrong decision, but now looking back at it, I've learned so much out of it. So in future, it become easier and easier. And then the other thing is also, the reality is, once you've decided left or right, you close the option of, so let's say you say left, then you close the option of right. And I'm just thinking in basic living, deciding to get married, what makes that person the person that you want to spend the rest of your life with? Because by saying yes to that one person, you're saying no to all the thousands of potential people that could become your way, but you made a decision to say no to them. And I think for a lot of people, that's probably then maybe a hard decision to say, I'd rather keep my options open. And yet, those of us who are married and have the right partner, you know, we just thank God daily for our partners. And there's absolutely no one else that I want to have in my life than my partner. So, yes, you know, if I look at my own life, I can point to direct incidents that, like, for instance, when I left my job at the IDC, I was just, in hindsight, frustrated by the pace of things. The people were great. The job, the content was absolutely great. I had a fantastic salary. Every 2 weeks, I was in another part of the country, investigating someone's business. I had a MasterCard, and I could stay in nice hotels and eat what I want to eat. And yet there was this restlessness in me that felt like, here I'm sitting every 2 weeks, eye to eye with the top executive of that company, and a week later, on his behalf, I go and defend his business at the board. So what's wrong with me? Why can't I become one of these executives? And I probably impulsively changed a tack, and when an opportunity came my way, I just jumped ship. And the moment I jumped ship, that day that I resigned and I walked out of that office, I knew I made the wrong choice here. And it also panned out to be the wrong choice. And a year later, I lost a lot of money and stuff like that. But then at the same time, I look back at that wrong choice. If I haven't jumped ship, I could have probably hang on to a safe job, only to find myself now at times like this with BEE out on the street with no further street skills of surviving. You know, who knows, I might not have had a pension. So it's that you can't really try and analyze what would have been if I kept in there. So I'm personally at the stage where although I know that starting point, decision was wrong, the end result of me working it right was the right thing to do. And it has led me on the path that today I'm involved with the stuff that I'm involved in. Yeah, so I think it's unavoidable. Decision has to be made. And I think we are faced with a decision time right now again. Most of us are saying, all right, this post-COVID, and we don't even know how long this post-COVID will take. Because I think now that the government has had a sense of power, they're not going to easily lift this whole COVID thing, and they can easily reinstall it. But the fact is, we need to get on with our lives. We can't live in uncertainty. You need to make decisions. So you have to create your new certainty. And I think in that process of creating the new certainty, lots of decisions will be made, most of them wrong, but in making them, you'll arrive at the right ones. And I think the ultimate then is make sure that in this decision making, you surround yourself with people that is already battle hardened like you, who has developed a strong gut feel. Because when you face an uncertainty, there's strength in numbers, provided that you work with numbers that are battle hardened and has developed this gut feel. So yes, I'll leave it at that.
Wise as always, Jasper. Thank you. It reminds me, I don't know why, but it reminds me, Edward de Bono uses this analogy of a donkey standing still, and on his right side and on his left side, he has an equal bale of hay. And Edward de Bono says, well, which is the right bale of hay for him to choose? And there's only one wrong answer, and that is to stay where he is. Because if he stays where he is, he's going to die of starvation. But whether he goes to the left or whether he goes to the right, he's still going to eat. So it's the decision that is that is more important than just standing still. So that's an interesting. I often come to that. I often have young people saying, "Oh, but I want to do this, but I want to do this, and I don't know if I should do this, and this should and must, and what if this doesn't work out? What if this doesn't work?" And I say, well, if either option is attractive, then it doesn't matter which you choose. Doesn't matter. Just go. Just do it. It'll figure its way out. But I also want to just. It's interesting about this. What do you feel like when you make a wrong decision? And I've had a number of women reflect on getting divorced and say, you know, and I don't know why they say this, but I hear them say it often. As I was walking down the aisle, I knew I was making the wrong decision. And I often wonder, what do you do then? What do you do then? And that's the trick, is when you know you've made the wrong decision, do you have the courage to say, nope, this is not going to work for me? So we are going to change track tomorrow. Donovan has put his hand up and he is going to share his story with us tomorrow. So he said it's going to be unstructured. And we just love it that people are themselves and unique, and we get to share a little bit in their lives. So thank you, Donovan, for your willingness to share with us, and we really look forward to that tomorrow. Thanks, everybody. Have a fabulous day.